They've come to denazify Ukraine. With swastikas on their bodies. And with sadistic tendencies.
We'll find everyone, we'll kill everyone.
Entire divisions in the Russian army are made up of Nazis.
He's a Nazi and he's a Nazi. I'm also a Nazi.
Putin needs them as they charge into the attack with pleasure.
Sorry, but you have to put up with me. Yes, that's me.
Clinical sadists, for whom the main thing is to kill and torture with incredible cruelty. Thousands of ideological Nazis have officially joined the Russian army. Officers, soldiers have tattoos with swastikas and images of Hitler on their bodies. They publicly label themselves as his followers. Nazism is swallowing up Russian troops. Who created this monster? Will they be able to keep it under control? And what will happen when the ultra-nationalists, maddened with blood and impunity, return home from the front line? Seeing these special reports, the Nazis in the Russian army, what is the strategy of Hitler's fanatics fighting for Putin?
We will strive for the denazification of Ukraine. Achieving denazification. Denazification. Some kind of denazification is needed.
Some kind of denazification. Quite a hard word for everyone to pronounce.
Denazification operation.
Denazification. Russians have heard this word hundreds of times from Putin and his subordinates.
Denazification. 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 Denazification of Ukraine.
That denazification was one of the pretexts for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Allegedly, it is necessary to kill all the Nazis there. At the beginning of 2022, the residents of the Russian Federation could not even imagine that in the so-called special military operation, combat units of Russian neo-Nazis would take an active part. It is nonsense. Nazis are enemies, not comrades. They are against Russia, not supporting it. However, Russian army openly admits that it is composed of Nazi groups, which Russian propaganda glorifies all the time. The most PR unit is the Rusich sabotage and assault group. Russian so-called war correspondents of Central Television come often to them to do their reporting. A cameraman is taking close-up shots of the stripes on the soldiers' uniforms. This is a Kolovrat, 8-spoked wheel swastika.
I'm interested in asking a Russian nationalist some words.
What nations do you hate the most? Slatkov, a military correspondent, asks the commander of the Rusich group.
The hatred for Jews, Dagestans.
Now the commander considers Ukrainians his worst enemies.
As a nation, Ukrainians do not exist. The enemy must be destroyed because only the dead do not shoot in the back. Moreover, the dead do not make children.
Commander has long been known in Russia as a neo-Nazi nicknamed Fritz, Alexei Milchakov. He became infamous long before the war against Ukraine.
Ate the dog.
Indeed, back in 2011, at a young age, Milchakov posted photos of killing a puppy, dismembering it, and eating it. Then there were photos where Milchakov poses against the background of a flag with a swastika. He considers Hitler his inspiration. The Russian media back then labeled Milchakov as a disgrace.
Citizens of St. Petersburg are shocked.
The tension of the undeclared war with animals.
The law enforcement agencies are already interested in the young man.
Milchakov is now a commander in the army of the Russian Federation. Russian propagandists invite him to the studio as a respected expert.
We will find out more from the commander of the Rusich group, Alexei Milchakov. Greetings, Alexei. You've come to us in a company. Introduce your companion, please.
He is my deputy.
The deputy, Jan Petrovsky, is also a Nazi. Two ideological followers of Hitler are in the studio in front of a huge audience. The presenter listens to their every word carefully. In his interviews, Milchakov clearly states his identity.
I am a Nazi, I can repeat it again, I am a Nazi, if you want, I can zig.
Milchakov has also openly claims that he prefers violence. He informs subscribers of his unit's Telegram channel how he maimed and killed, captures Ukrainian soldiers. He publishes instructions on how to provide torture before execution. Milchakov needs war to satisfy his sadistic tendencies.
Pearson's gods. Don't like it? Go to hell. As Mussolini said, a nation needs to be refreshed once in a quarter of a century by war. When you kill a person, you feel the thrill of the hunt. I have no moral constraints.
He has a peculiar concept of military valor as well.
War is when you and 10 comrades come to someone from the back, you beat him and walk away happily.
It is important to emphasize once again that this is not a marginal who simply bought a machine gun and went to fight in Ukraine. Milchakov is a commander of a Russian army unit.
We are the part of the regular armed forces of the Ministry of Defense, one of the regular units. We've been in the Ministry of Defense since 2022.
In this unit, all soldiers have Nazi conviction. According to this principle, they were actually recruited to Rusich. Most of them hide their faces, and Milchakov is doing as much publicity as he can to promote himself. He can do anything. After all, Putin personally got him to the army. The Nazi achieved it through his acquaintance.
I told Anton that I wanted to serve in the 76th Division. Can you ask Mr. Putin for this? His answer was positive. He went to Vladimir Vladimirovich and told him that I wanted to serve in the 76th. Immediately Shamanov, the commander of the airborne forces at that time, was informed about me. And on May 10th I got a call from the airborne forces.
Milchakov soon became head of the Rusich unit. His soldiers are characterized by brutal cruelty. Yevgeny Raskazov, call sign Topaz, is a convicted fanatic of Hitler. On the day of the Nazi's dictator birthday, he made a statement.
He taught us to fight for the ancestral lands that historically belonged to our people, and despite the fact that he is not with us, his deeds and words live on in our hearts.
In terms of sadistic perversion, Topaz Raskazov may even be ahead of his commander Milchakov.
I want to fight. It's like wanting a woman. When you kill, you savor the fact that his wife is a widow, how they are crying with the whole family, and you get an erection.
The Rusich unit uses drones with the K-51 chemical grenade, which is a banned weapon. The Nazis' aim is to kill all Ukrainians without choice.
No one deserves forgiveness or sympathy. By killing them all, you can ensure your victory.
Rusich is just one of the Nazi units of the Russian army. There is another Russian brigade, Espanola. Russian propaganda is actively promoting it too.
Work in all directions, so the front line is currently being carried out by the fighters of the volunteer brigade Espanola.
The presenter says mostly football fans are in the brigade, and that's only part of the truth. Fans are recruited with ultra-right Nazi views. Here is the commander of one of the units of the Espanola Brigade, Mikhail Tukhanov, call sign Pitbull. Swastika tattoos all over the body. Before the war, he was in prison for kidnapping.
Everyone knows I've been in jail.
Pitbull Tukhanov is Hitler's fan.
When Hitler came to power, he started to raise Germany from its knees. He tried to develop his nation. He had the idea of National Socialism, exactly as the development of his nation. Then it turned into Nazism, which led to more violent actions, including the extermination of Jews.
Resulting to absurd and ridiculous arguments, Tukhanov justifies the Holocaust. But he is now being not only for Hitler but also for Putin, and is obsessed on the idea of the destruction of the Ukrainian nation. Espanola increasingly resembles the SS.
Find them all, kill them all.
The Espanola fighters are driven by violence and desire to kill, just like the Rusich soldiers.
Well, isn't war wonderful?
Espanola, as well as Rusich, is officially part of the Russian army. Moreover, propaganda is asking viewers to donate money to the Nazis.
Espanola Brigade, let's donate to them.
At the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense provides the Espanola Brigade with new equipment and weapons. They give new automatic rifles for testing, supply robotic equipment.
In fact, Espanola has now become a kind of intellectual platform for testing modern weapons.
The Russian army includes soldiers from the Imperial Legion, ultra-nationalists who profess the idea of white supremacy, and fighters from the Russian national unity who wear armbands with swastikas and use fascist greetings. These are just the organizations that are in the public eye. In reality, the Russian army has a way greater number of Nazis. Some Nazi formations invented a new swastika by taking the two symbols of the so-called special military operation, the Latin letter Z, and crossing them. They also used elements of the St. George's ribbon. It is the height of absurdity, but many Russian soldiers have tattoos with swastikas from Hitler's time, like this fighter. All of this is well known to the Russian leadership and Putin personally. However, the Kremlin has no intention of punishing or removing all these Nazis. The Russian authorities are already justifying openly their Nazi soldiers. Andrei Kotsapolov, head of the State Duma Defense Committee, says,
Participating in the war was the only way to correct the volunteers who fight in Ukraine as part of the Russian troops who adhere to neo-Nazi views.
Putin needs Nazis. They are much more effective in war than the usual mobilized soldiers who have to be forced into the fight. They don't want to fight, they think about how to survive and return home. On the other hand, ideological Nazis are happy to fight. War, violence and killing are the meaning of life for them. They are often better trained than other soldiers in the Russian army.
Putin understands perfectly well that his generals are corrupt beasts who only think about how to fill their pockets. And this, of course, affects the quality of combat training. On the other hand, here are groups of people and entire units that are motivated, well-trained, have undergone special training.
That's why the Russian army needs such Nazi groups as Rusich. Its commander, a Hitler fanatic, doesn't care about the opinion of Russians or the outrage of those who cherish the memory of the ancestors who fought against fascism.
Among those who criticize me, there aren't many people who want to fight. As for me, I can only say I'm sorry. You'll have to put up with it. Yeah, that's me. If you can't do anything, then don't say anything.
This is very similar to Putin's well-known phrase.
Like it or don't like it, bear it.
The Kremlin raised this monster which Russians now have to put up with. The Russian authorities supported and financed neo-Nazi military movements. For example, Russian national unity was controlled by the Russian security services. They were used in military operations actions in Donetsk and Luhansk regions in 2014 when Putin officially declared that the Russian army was not there. The Kremlin then used the carrot-and-stick approach to deal with the Nazis.
They were provided with resources. For example, according to one of the functionaries of the Russian national unity who fled Russia at that time, the methodology of the Russian security services was such that criminal cases were brought against leaders and activists of the neo-Nazi movement. They were simply forced into the choice of either going to prison or participating in the recruitment of people for the war in Ukraine.
The majority's decision is obvious. Neo-Nazis have chosen the opportunity to kill with impunity and get good money for it.
I don't think I work, I think it's a hobby for which I am also paid. It gives me a pleasant sense of well-being.
Milchikov's unit has been fighting in Ukraine since 2014. On the other hand, the Espanola battalion, where Pitbull Takhanov serves, was created by the Russian authorities after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
The Espanola unit, which is now fighting against Ukraine as part of the Russian army, was created and supported with the help of Russian special services. They were covered by various deputies, officials from Единая Россия. In recent years, Единая Россия has been copying various extremist and radical elements that were ideologically very close to Putinism and including football fans.
United Russia, as a party managing resources, could attract football hooligans. The football movement was taken under control by methods of special services and through the party structures. So it is not surprising that by the 2022 all this youth in slender rows wedged into the so-called special military operation.
Football ultras, and not only, were taken.
And of course the most diverse Nazis, different kinds of aggressive nationalists are trying to join them.
The commander of one of the Espanola unit, Pitbull Turkanov, is a mixed martial arts MMA fighter, and it is not a coincidence either.
Recruitment of contractors for the war being waged by the Kremlin is not only done through military commissariats, but also through various Russian martial arts clubs. They are under the control of Kirienko and Trutnev, people from the presidential administration. This whole big system, in which a large number of Russian ultra-rightists have always been grouped.
The system takes people from the very bottom. Now, Pitbull is no longer just a marginal fascist criminal, but also a hero. He gets a medal from the very deputy chief of the main department of the Russian General Staff himself. Russia's new reality is the Nazis who aren't on the backdrop of the red Soviet banner. And here is the Kremlin-appointed head of the occupied Crimea, Aksyonov, awarding Alexei Melchakov.
The state is interested in us. The situation is turning to other way positive to us.
Officials are coming to Melchakov to pay homage. Here are deputies of the Russian State Duma, Alexei Borodai and Vitaly Milonov, reporting that they donated ammunition to Rusich.
The issue of denazification is topical.
No, Putin is not talking about Russia, he is still talking about Ukraine. The cynicism is stunning. To attack a state without justification, accusing it of Nazism, and then using ideological Nazis in the war against this very state. Cynicism is Putin's strong suit. For example, only he can admire Joseph Goebbels during the meeting with rabbis.
Goebbels used to say that the more incredible the lie, the quicker it would be believed, and he succeeded. He was a talented man.
But even Goebbels was not that demanding. Russia's massive propaganda manages to combine the memory of the great victory over the German fascists with the glorification of modern Russian neo-Nazis, to combine the St. George's ribbon, a symbol of war memory that is almost sacred to Russians, with the swastika. They mix it into immersion and feed it to Russians. If Putin was really looking for the threat of Nazism, he should just look around and look into the mirror. Putin is turning into the Führer and Russia into a Nazi state. If at the beginning of the full-scale invasion the head of the Kremlin assured, "We will do everything possible to ensure that the civilian population of Ukraine does not suffer," now representatives of the authorities are openly saying that ordinary Ukrainians should be massacred.
2 million people must be denazificated, it means exterminated.
Hate and fascism have totally absorbed the whole media space of Russia.
This country should not exist. And we will do everything to make it disappear. I told you, we will burn your constitution right on Kremlin Street.
Replenishment of enmity and inciting hatred are the methods of Putin's modern warriors. The neo-Nazi that killed already, Igor Mangushev, took the skull of a dead Ukrainian army soldier from the battlefield and appeared on stage with it.
Ukraine must be de-Ukrainianized. We are fighting with this idea, so all carriers of this idea must be destroyed.
The fetishism associated with this pathological sadism is a reference to those ancient roots they loved, when you had to make a bowl out of an enemy's skull. The use of these groups are also served for showing particular cruelty and displaying the brutal horror what awaits those who will not submit. Those who will submit, according to the Russians, to the Russian authorities, have a chance for existence, a slavish existence, but an existence. All others must die.
Russian propaganda is encouraged to kill even Ukrainian children. After Russian attack, the children's clinic Ahmadiyya in Kiev with a missile.
We must be aware it's simple and scary, and there are no people on the other side, not a single person. Our missiles do not kill people, not a single human being. There are no people there.
Such a cruelty adhered only to the Nazis during the World War II, who killed children and sent them to concentration camps just because they were Slavs or Jews. Putin is not much different from Hitler, and Russian Nazis from Hitler's Nazis.
Putinism today is something like analog of National Socialism. Neo-Nazism in this sense finds a fertile ground due to the aggressions that Putin started. And neo-Nazism, of course, is one of the engines of this aggression.
And all that has been raised into the level of a new Russian ideology. One of the main instigators is the so-called philosopher Alexander Dugin, who is very close to the Kremlin. In his articles, he raves about the ideas of fascism.
Fascism is as boundless as our lands and red as our blood.
Dugin works at the Russian State University for the Humanities. He heads the Alien Higher Political School, the same Alien, the philosopher, who supported fascist ideology in the middle of the last century.
Fascism was right because it proceeded from a healthy national patriotic feeling without which no nation can either assert its existence or create its culture.
Now these ideas of Lenin are being promoted en masse by Dugin and the Russian authorities and propaganda.
The ideologies that made this war possible and the ideology that guides the Russian army and pushes it to commit war crimes is official Russian ideology, which can be characterized as fascist.
It all started a long time ago. Dmitry Rogozin, now a member of the Federation Council on Defense, zigged during the rally in 2007.
Glory to Russia! Glory to Russia!
And it's our days, nationalists in Kuban hold a procession.
Do not retreat, Russians go forward!
This is another typical situation. Woman from Yakutia bumps into Nazis in the Moscow subway.
Get out of here! Russia is for Russians! Moscow is for Russians! Glory to Tesak!
In one of Russian schools, children are taught to zig with the words, "I'm Russian." Beating people on the basis of racial hatred, persecution of citizens of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, mass hysteria in Makhachkala when a crowd stormed the airport building in bloodthirst, massacre of Jews. Nazi moods and movements are growing, realizing their impunity. And the Russian Federation is turning into a powder keg. The Russians themselves will suffer from the Nazis formed by the Kremlin.
They will start robbing. They will start doing all the same things that happened in the 19th. There was widespread banditti at that time, and now there will be a rampant military criminals who supposedly distinguished themselves in the war. But in reality, they were distinguished only by the fact that they engaged in looting, murder and robbery.
Russian Nazis can no longer do without war and murder. Everyone who does not share their terrible ideology is an enemy to them. The cultivation of hatred towards Ukrainians and other nations, the glorifications of Nazi units and their sadistic brutal crimes against the Ukrainian people have demonstrated clearly. Russia is following the bloodiest practices of the past, uses the ideology and methods of fascism. The Russian regime and neo-Nazism are already being called Russism. After all, they understand the risks. Putin's thugs, who are now mercilessly killing Ukrainians, could be sent at any moment by the Kremlin regime to other countries, which the Russian Führer declares hostile. Denazification is indeed necessary, the denazification of Russia. Maxim Ulapov, Special Report.